I guess I gotta rank these, don't I? Alright. What is going on, you guys? Theo here with the big review, back yet again with another King of Fighters All-Star video, and today is the day that we finally finish the series of FES tier lists that we started on Monday, taking each element one by one, day by day, video by video, and breaking them down to the top 5 best PVE characters in the game. So before we get into the final list, make sure, if you haven't already done so, Genocide Cutter, that subscribe button, that like button helps me out a ton as a new YouTuber. So let's go ahead and get into the list. And this is a list that I'm going to admit right now, I put this off all week. I intended this to come out a couple days ago, and I decided that I needed an extra couple days to think about this because this is not a straightforward pick for a list. So, Yellow. Yellow overall isn't terrible, it just isn't great. And the problem is, a lot of these characters are either not made for PvE, or they're really only good for general mobbing and bossing. So, for instance, like RHD and things like that, they're decent, but they're not great. So, for instance, characters that fall into that category. Kamui, he is a decent mobber, decent bosser. He'll get the job done in RHD, but where else are you going to use him? And then if you see characters like, oh, I don't know, Lady Chang. Lady Chang, very, very underrated mobber, very underrated bosser for RHD. She's actually a walking hitbox, as one of my friends, King Taiar, put it. However, outside of that, when are you going to use her? Her Awakening rotation's really nice because of her stuns, but then you see Chris. Chris sees actually a little bit of play because he has some burn that's very nice on his kit. If you go into his cores here, you'll see he's going to have burn explosion as well. So he's not a bad character, but he doesn't see a whole lot of play. He's not an amazing character. So the problem with some of these characters is they just aren't that special. They aren't characters that you see a lot. And so it's very hard to kind of rank them, because I feel like if I were to have done it a few days ago, I'd have been sitting here going, yeah, this is great for mobbing, but everything else sucks. Or this is really decent for RHD, but everything else, you're not going to use it. So I wanted to take an extra few days to kind of compile my thoughts, try and break this down in a way that was a little less boring. So I think we've got it down today, but really outside of those top 3 picks, it starts to become pick your poison. So really, it's up to you guys at that point. But I tried my best to pick out the ones, pros and cons wise, usefulness, utility, I leaned on it big time, which, speaking of criteria, you know, with our criteria, it came in big time as far as how we rank these for this list. So first and foremost, as always, is going to be kit. And then next up is going to be comparison across the board to the rest of their peers. And then finally, the last thing that we look at is going to be versatility across all modes. So it's going to be a situation where I'm leaning very heavily on versatility as far as this list is concerned by comparison to some of the other ones, but I'm not going to be doing your usual honorable mention, which usually is just a character I like to spotlight that may or may not be, you know, the best thing in the world, but it's a character that people overlook, and really I don't have a whole lot of that in this grouping. You know, honestly, like I already said in this intro, I've kind of pointed out the characters that aren't going to make the list that I guess you technically could. I mean, they're not terrible, but they're not great either. However, I will say that, you know, at the end of the day, Lady Chang is a very underrated mobber. She is very good for RHD. Chris is going to see some play for that burn explosion, so if you end up pulling him and you don't have a good burn character, he might get you through some content. He's actually half decent at it. Kamui, kind of same thing, although he's a collab, so if you don't have him, you're not going to get him for a while, if ever. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, like for instance with Psyche here, yeah, he's a meme in PvE. Sorry, Psyche. So let's go ahead and hop into the list and start with our number 5 pick. Kicking off the list here, we have Terry Bogard. Now, Terry Bogard recently was buffed, and that did help his PvE viability quite a bit. It isn't anything meta-breaking, but it is a welcome change for him. So, starting things off here, he has a leadership skill that's going to increase yellow element fighters' attack by 45% and their defense by 7%, which is an okay leadership skill, but probably nothing you're ever going to really be using. Now, when you get into his cores, he's going to have increases to his attack, his 15% to his power charge rate. He's going to have some stun duration decrease in there, which is always welcome. He has a massive increase to his defense of 15-20, and then he also has increase all team members' attack by 20% and movement speed by 20% when power is 1 or more. And then he's going to gain super armor and decrease damage received by 30%, and also become immune to freeze and petrify effects for 5 seconds when attacked in guard stance. So, I know there's a lot of people out there that love Terry and really want this character to be something super special, but he's kind of a wonky setup with his cores, I'm not going to lie. Some of these are kind of goofy, at least if we're talking about PvE. They're not anything overly powerful, but they're going to get the job done. Really, with Terry, the biggest thing that he's capable of is outputting really, really good damage, but when it comes to his skills here, he's going to increase attack by 28% for 8 seconds and have super armor, and he can also interrupt with this skill, so his S1's pretty strong. Moving on to his S2, he's going to have damage immunity, and then he's going to have roll disable on here as well as a 100% chance to break guard. So a lot of his kit is geared towards PvP, you'll notice, but a lot of these things don't necessarily pertain to PvE. And then on his S3, which is his power wave, he's going to increase skill damage by 50% when power is 1 or more, and then he's going to increase power charge rate by 15% for 7 seconds upon landing a skill, and this can be used while being attacked. So he has 2 sources of interrupt, which is obviously going to be useful. And down here, if you scroll down, you're actually going to see on Buster Wolf, which is one of his finishers, he's going to increase active skill damage by 20% for 10 seconds when using a skill. So on his finisher, he has an effect as well that's really nice. So yeah, with Terry, really, he's just going to be an overall damage dealer. He's going to be a pretty decent mobber, a really nice bosser for RHD as well. Being that he's a yellow balance, that doesn't really do much for him, but outside of that, he does have some support with some cards and things like that that are going to be beneficial for him. So overall with Terry, he's a pretty strong pick in general for yellow. He's not anything that is going to be over the top or broken, but definitely warranted to have him starting out the list here. So let's go ahead and move on to the number 4 pick. Next up, we have Rudi. So Rudi is, of all of the Seven Knights characters, the least geared towards PvE, and it shows very much so. However, he's still deserving of a spot on this list for a couple of different reasons. So obviously, the first big reason is going to be the Seven Knights stones are going to put his stats over the top for things in PvE, which that alone right there kind of makes you by default part of the list. And then another thing is going to be his leadership skill, increasing yellow element fighters' attack by 55%, which is another nice perk in his kit for the yellow typing, being that he is one of the better kind of leaders for yellow in general. Now, as far as the rest of his kit, really, Rudi, what you would use him for, he actually has a specialist role as well as some other things that he can do pretty decently. But overall, his specialist role, if you guys do not play League, obviously, first and foremost, you should be. But with League, when it comes to defense week, Rudi is a problem, and therefore the best counter, the best check to Rudi in League is going to be Rudi himself. So that part right there makes him useful. The next thing is he is still a very competent, very strong mobber, and a pretty good bosser as well. So when you look at his kit, you're going to see that He's going to have increases to his defense. He's going to become immune to stun. All active team members gain super armor for 3 seconds upon landing an active skill as a critical hit. That has a cooldown of 20 seconds. And then he has the 7 Knights Core, which is increasing attack by 20% and decreasing damage received by 20% when their HP is 50% or more. And then on his final core, he's going to increase attack by 20% and power charge rate by 5% when his HP is 60% or more. And he's going to decrease his damage received by 30% when his HP is 35% or less. So, sprinkled in here, you also have some increases to power charge rate, increase to attack, crit rate, so on and so forth. Really, with all of that in there, Rudi doesn't have a ton of things that are going to set him apart and make him useful for things like Immortals and, obviously Guild Raid and all these different modes, but he is kind of a walking tank, so he is able to get through mobs very easily without much of a problem. And then his Awakening rotation when it comes to RHD bosses and things of that nature is also really good. He is a defense type also, which is worth noting for RHD. Obviously, you need yellow attack when you get into the high tiers, but RHD does call for defense types quite a bit intermittently, so you might be able to get quite a bit of usefulness from him in that regard. But looking at his skills, you're going to see he increases his attack by 46% of defense for 7 seconds when using a skill, and then a 30% chance to ignore guard upon landing a successful attack. So he's basically going to have defense to attack conversion as well, which is very nice. You can slap a Kaya set on him, and he will do very well with it. Next up, you are going to have on his S2 Hyper Armor, as well as a Stun, and this can be used while being attacked, so it is an interrupt, so pretty nice. There's a reason why this character, as you can tell, is very feared in PvP, but he also increases his defense by 30% for 7 seconds and increases his crit rate by 14% for 7 seconds with his S3, and then he has his finishers here. But overall, with Rudi, good mobber, really useful for the defense week of League, but outside of that for PvE, not a whole lot going on there. Not a whole lot of usefulness as far as his overall utility goes, but at the end of the day, still a pretty strong character in general. So let's go ahead and get into the number 3 pick. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Xian. So Xian is going to be the yellow attack equivalent to kind of K for the yellow element overall. He's going to increase yellow element fighters' attack by 45% and power charge rate by 20%, which is, as we've always talked about in this series, an important leadership to have. So very, very good leadership skill. He is a yellow attack, so he is very good for RHD as well. When you start to get into his cores, you start to see why he is a pretty good character overall. He's going to have increases to his damage, he's going to have increase to his crit rate, but then he's going to decrease the target's defense by 35% for 5 seconds when attacking a shocked enemy, which we'll get to his shock here momentarily. But then he's going to recover his HP by 2% every 1 second for 5 seconds when attacked by a shocked enemy. So, very, very nice there. And then you get into some of his shock output, which is dealing 2 times remaining shock damage to the target and remove shock upon landing a crit on a cooldown of 15 seconds. There's a PvP exclusive there, but again, doesn't pertain to this list. But he does have Shock Explosion, which is very nice. Getting into his skills, he has Super Armor, 100% chance to break the target's guard on his S1. His S2 is going to decrease his damage received by 75% for 3 seconds, and deal shock damage equal to 32% of attack to the target every 1 second for 7 seconds. And that is going to be, if I can get this guy to pull up here, upon landing a skill. So, on his S3, he is going to increase attack by 28% for 7 seconds, with a 50% chance to reset the cooldown when using a skill. And then he's going to also drop lightning on the opponent. So, overall, very, very strong kit with him. He's a good character. He is a shock exploder, which is very important for various modes. He is going to obviously have a dot, which is a nice welcome change from a lot of the characters on this list that, as we've mentioned, don't have that. And then, obviously, all that being said, he just has the things you would generally look for as far as his typing, and then as well as his leadership skill. So he is kind of by default the number 3 pick here for these reasons. I'm not ever going to say he's the best character in the game overall, but he is a character that sees quite a bit of play and quite a bit of utility based around the fact that he does have those things in his kit that kind of make him useful in different modes. So that is going to be Xian, and let's go ahead and move on to the number 2 pick. Coming in at number 2 is going to be Orochi Iori. So Orochi Iori is kind of interesting in the capacity that he was one of the original fests that was added into the game, and he still, to this day, is viable, and not just viable, but one of the most commonly used leaders for PvE content. And really it just comes down to his leadership skill. He's going to increase attack type fighters' attack by 60% and decrease their defense by 10%. So the increase of 60% to attack for attack type fighters is really, really good for PvE, obviously. It can help nuke things just that much more. You know, it's going to be kind of compatible with some of the best attackers in the entire game, like a Delens, or like a BS Rugal, or like a Lady Zero, or any of these just high damage output, great general PvE characters. So he is kind of the default leader for a lot of them. Now, when you get into kind of his kit, you're going to see here, and again, remember, this is a character that was pretty much out at release, but he has a 100% chance to reset the cooldowns of all active skills when using ultimate moves, which is very nice. He increases his penetration by 200 for 5 seconds upon landing a skill. That's going to stack up to 5. And then he gains 1.4% power upon landing a crit. And then he has various increases here to his damage output and his crit, so on and so forth here. So the nice thing is he has that 30% power charge rate increase, so his power charge is very strong overall in his kit. His damage output is very strong. The problem with him is he's the squishiest thing. He's the glassiest of all glass cannons. A lot of people hate how squishy he is, but you can't argue with his usability and his utility in PvE. Getting into his skills, he has super armor on his S1. He's going to increase his crit further by 60% on his crit damage on his S2. Now, as S3, he's going to increase his attack by 20% for 8 seconds, and increase his crit rate by 15% for 8 seconds, and then decrease defense by 12%. He disables the target's roll for 3 seconds as well. So, overall, his skills, pretty decent, but not anything overly insane there for PvE. Overall, with him, he is just going to be there to help build the damage for your team, as well as do more damage for himself. And then, obviously, like I said, he is very squishy, but that is pretty much what he is trying to accomplish. He is a very one-trick pony, kind of like a lot of characters on this list, but for him, at least in his neck of the woods, he is great at what he's trying to do. So that is going to be your number 2 pick. Let's get into the number 1 and finish up with our final pick of these tier lists for the week. Coming in at the number 1 position for the Yellow Element Fest is obviously going to be Lady Zero Original. So the thing about Lady Zero that is so impressive is how she has stood the test of time at this point, being a character that came out so long ago, yet she has maintained her relevancy despite all of the power creep that has happened over the past year, with things being added to the game like collab characters, specifically with the Seven Knights characters, the Boss Syndrome characters, yet she still finds a way to continue to be one of the premier damage dealers and PvE mobbers in the game. It's kind of incredible, but let's get into why. So first and foremost, her leadership skill is going to increase Nest Fighters' attack by 40% and their power charge rate by 20%. As you all know from watching the rest of the videos in this series, that type of leadership skill is very sought after, and being that hers affects Nest Fighters, which are some of the better characters in the game for PvE content, that makes her by default a very strong pick, and that's without even getting into her kit. but that is a very, very nice perk in her kind of arsenal. But then if you look at her boss fighter tag there as well, that means she's also going to work well under a leader like Boss Syndrome Orochi. So a lot of different things you can do with her with team comps. She's also a yellow attack, so that attack typing will come in handy, specifically as it pertains to the Reviving Hell's Dungeon, but also as it pertains to having a character like Orochi Iori, perhaps, as her leader. So, very, very nice overall with these two things in her kit. But when you go and you take a look at her cores, you're going to see that she is basically going to do nothing but try to output more damage. So she's going to have increases to her attack, increases to her crit, increases to her power gain. But then you're also going to see down here that she increases her penetration by 400 for 5 seconds upon each attack. That stacks up to 5. And then she reflex Petrify effect, which that last part doesn't come into play very often in PVE, but being able to have the defense shred that she has there, the damage ramp that she has, very, very nice. And then obviously on her last core she becomes immune to damage for 2 seconds with a cooldown of 25 seconds, and she decreases the attacker's attack by 20% for 5 seconds. So overall, the name of the game with her is just going to be outputting very, very, very consistent damage, and also one of the best mobbers in the entire game, one of the best bossers in the game. She's just a very strong pick for those things because of some of the things going on in those cores. Her skill effects don't even really play a huge part in a lot of her PvE viability. For instance, if you look at her skills, you're going to have an increase to attack by 28% for 7 seconds, which is nice, but then you have a 100% chance to reset the cooldown upon a successful attack on Glaugan, so that's a really nice perk. You look at her S2, and it has a PvP exclusive in there, but other than that, nothing to speak of. And then if you look at her S3, you're going to see she has Super Armor and then Petrify for 2 seconds upon a successful attack, which helps her out a ton with her Awakening rotation. Her Awakening rotation, you might as well just delete the RHD boss. That RHD boss will not make it through that Awakening rotation if she's fully built up. It just isn't going to happen. She can pretty much go through any RHD tier as long as she's at the required levels without any penalties and pretty much just clear it for you. So she's very, very good at that. She one-taps most things, and then bosses just get rotated into oblivion. So overall with her, you know, really what you want to do, just slap a Leah set on her. In fact, I think I even have one on there, yeah. Just slap a Leah set on her and let her go. She is one of the best DPS in the game. She is going to carry you for the yellow element. She is one of my highest recommendations for new players that are starting out to find her in the unified banner and get her as soon as possible. She will carry you quite a bit. So overall, Lady Zero Original, easy number one. Really no competition in that regard. So that is going to be not only the Yellow Element Fest tier list, but the finish to the tier lists in general. And I could not be more excited to be out of the tier list. I don't know about you guys, but this has been a fun series to do, but also kind of a... this one was tough. I actually, like I said, I put this one off all week because I did not really feel comfortable with a lot of these guys. So overall, I feel like that's as good as it's going to get. You know, obviously, with this being kind of a very thin pool and a very one-trick pony pool. Again, this is basically just a mobbing pool. There's not a whole lot of stuff here that sees a whole lot of other play outside of that. Again, without taking PvP into consideration, if you just talk PvE content, Yellow just doesn't see a ton of play outside of its top 2, maybe 3. So from there, it's budget picks for mobbing and things of that nature. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this series. Hopefully you enjoyed this specific list. Now let's go ahead and move away from tier lists and get into this dev note that was released overnight because it's looking pretty interesting. Alright you guys, the last thing that we need to cover today is going to be the news that was released overnight last night regarding the new guild raid, some Valentine's event information, and then a new survey coming very soon to update more Fest characters. So there isn't a ton of information in here. These are more like teases, but they are exciting things nonetheless. So basically what we already knew is that we were going to be getting more content for the guild raid, and it looks like we now have a little bit of elaboration on that. So if you end up scrolling down here, you'll see that we are going to be getting a Lady Chang event for the guild raid. Now, it gives us a little bit of info up there. It says that we will be getting rubies and fess memories for this, which is very exciting. It also says other various rewards, but honestly, between rubies and memories, what else can you really ask for? So this is exciting news. It doesn't necessarily give us a date for when this stuff is coming. It just says that it is coming soon. But this is exciting news, especially for those that do take advantage of the guild raid. But it doesn't look like, from what I can tell with her HP bar there, that she is going to have a huge HP pool. So, at least for what it looks like to be the normal difficulty, obviously. So, we'll have to wait and see if they're going to add higher difficulties for her. But we also know that we are going to be getting a lunatic difficulty for the Omega Rugal as well that it mentions. But they've mentioned that in the past, so not a lot of new information with that one. This is going to either be a welcome change for people, or they are not going to like it because it is kind of tough to get through the expert guild raid for a lot of guilds. So yeah, overall, we'll have to wait and see what it looks like, but the rewards sound really good for this Lady Chang event, so hopefully it ends up turning out to be something special for everybody. So if you guys aren't in a guild yet, make sure you do so, because it's looking like it's going to become more and more important, especially with rubies starting to get added into the rewards for these. But the next thing on the docket here, it does talk about the Valentine's event. So the Valentine's events, basically it looks like we're getting a new login streak that doesn't honestly look like anything super interesting. It looks like the best thing there is going to be the gold enhancement hammers, but outside of that, nothing too special. Then moving on here, we are going to have, it looks like, a Kasumi guild, or a Kasumi event as well. So not anything too groundbreaking or overly interesting here. It just says that it'll be coming out in February, which obviously, being that it's Valentine's themed, we knew we were going to be getting something for Valentine's Day, so hopefully we do get new characters with this as well. A lot of people are hoping for a new fess for the Valentine's event, but the other thing to remember with this, as always, is the prevailing theory is we are going to be getting whatever this next collab in February is after this event. So it could be bait, so just be wary. I would probably be very cautious with what it is as far as whether or not you decide to invest. Obviously, here on the channel we will do a should you summon at a certain point whenever that happens. But moving on to the last bit of news, it looks like there's going to be a new fighter survey to decide who is going to be worthy of getting the next round of buffs. So this is kind of exciting news because we did get the previous buffs pretty quick. So it does look like they are putting a concerted effort into going back and buffing a lot of these old characters, which I am very happy about. They need to do this, and a lot of games don't do this. They just kind of decide, okay, well, we're just going to release new content, not buff old characters, but this is good stuff. So very excited for when this happens. They don't tell us really a date on this, but it's looking like we will be getting it soon, and that's pretty much it for the news, but a pretty good Death Note overall. Overall, I would say that this is healthy stuff for the game. You know, we knew we were getting a Valentine's event, we knew we were getting updates to the guild raid, but being that we are going to be getting rubies as part of the rewards now, that is a very nice addition to things. So yeah, overall guys, this is a pretty nice Dev Note. Check it out on the forums, but that is going to be today's video. If you guys have not already done so, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Continue. Game over.